all for tuning in. This is Selena and
Come on.
together we make you plus happy. Each week we bring you someone who challenges us to define success and happiness on our own terms with a dose of laughter.
Remember to like and subscribe at You Plus Happy Podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at You Plus Happy. Hey, Selena.
Hola.
Hola. Anything exciting or reflective happened this week for you?
Oh my God. It is so crazy that you said reflective because you never say that. You say crazy, you say exciting or fun or something.
Yes.
I was going to talk about something reflective. That's crazy that the 1 week you say that. Aligning out here in these streets. Also, I was this might take like 2 minutes to explain. Just bear with me, y'all. So February, I had all these goals. Okay, let me tell you something. I hit like one, so I didn't hit any of them. So I Googled like how to set goals. What's a better way? I know about SMART goals. I know like technically what you're supposed to do, but I wasn't doing it. So I was like, let me set the same goals I set for February for March because I didn't do them. But I was like, the article was saying you need to reflect on why you hit your goals or why you didn't. So either way, you need to reflect. So that way, you know how to, if you did do them, you know what works for you. And if you didn't, you know why. So I spent some time and I was just typing on the computer. It wasn't even really journaling. And I wrote out why I didn't hit the goals. It took like an hour or so. It was amazing. It was phenomenal. Like it changed my whole, I have a whole new lens on it. And like one of them was something I was like, wow, I keep putting this off every month. I keep putting this off every month. And then I realized why. I was like, because low key, I think it's a scam. And like all this stuff about it, that all these feelings I had about it that I hadn't acknowledged. And then at the end, I was like, well, do you want this though? Do you have to play the game? Like you can't, it might be a scam, but it's part of the game. And you want to play the game, you gotta do the scam part. So it's not literally a scam. I'm not scamming, they're scamming. But it's a company that charge these fees for this thing that's BS, but you have to pay it in order to keep your certification valid or whatever. But I think it's like just a whole money grab, but it doesn't matter what I think. If I want to keep my certification, I gotta pay it. So it's like stuff like that. And then like I had some other goals, and it was just like, one of them, I was like, well, the things I put in place to accomplish this goal, I thought that it wouldn't really work. So I didn't even try, even though I had a plan, I just didn't do it. I was like, that probably ain't gonna really work. And I was like, Selena, you have to at least try. Like when I was reflecting, like you going into this negative, you didn't even believe. And if you think that strategy doesn't work, why did you even write it down? Why did you even make that your strategy? That's dumb. Yeah. So it was like, so I'm coming at all the goals completely different. And we're gonna see. Hopefully we get some different results. Okay. I'll let y'all know in April. Stay tuned.
That reflection piece is so important though. Like I'm glad that you were able to kind of like get to the root of why they weren't accomplished.
Yeah.
So, how many goals do you set a month? I'm just curious.
Well, last month, I'll give you a real number. It probably was like 8 goals, but they were in different areas. Like one was a money goal, which I did do that. Well, I didn't do that. Stop lying, Selena.
8 goals in a month is a lot, girl.
Well, I should have, but so I didn't, for the money one, something came up as it always does. But it was something fun. So no, and then it was a weight goal, and then it was my certification goal. It was like all different stuff that needed to get done. It's realistic, actually. It's just I gotta get my mind right.
It's fair. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm gonna tell you the real number. But anyway, I know that was long, but it felt so good. And yeah, so what about you?
So mine was also reflective. I took the DISC assessment that Justin, the guest from our last episode, had recommended, and I was a little bit surprised with the results. So there's like 4 different categories that you can basically test in. So there's like a little survey, you answer the questions. It only takes, I don't know, maybe like 10 minutes. So there's compliance, steadiness, influence, and dominance. And this is all like in relation to like how you perform at a job or like in a working environment. So my highest one was compliance and steadiness, which influence and dominance were on like the lower levels. Well, dominance I wasn't surprised with.
Yeah.
But influence, I was like, I don't like that. So it was like at 20%. So my reflection is like, I want to be more influential in like whatever space I'm in. So if it's work, if it's in the podcast, if it's like whatever goals I'm setting. So my goal for this month is really thinking about like how I can influence those around me in like a positive way. And that was kind of my takeaway. But yeah, I wasn't surprised with the steadiness or compliance. I'm like, I feel like I can be a bit of a perfectionist. So if you say like, hey, can you do this? I'm gonna like get it done and make sure that it's, of good quality. But yeah, the influence piece is something that I'm like, I want to bring that number up moving forward. So that was my little like reflective takeaway.
I think influence can be tricky though, because you don't know how you're gauging yourself in that assessment, but you don't know how you influence other people. You don't know what they feel.
Yeah. Well, so the way they defined it was influence describes the way you deal with people and the way you communicate and relate to others. And I think I have a tendency to kind of like I don't necessarily, I'm not like I want to be in the middle or like the center of attention. So I'll just kind of like be, I don't know. Like I won't necessarily take initiative if I don't have to, or unless I'm like very passionate about something. And I think that draws into like the influence piece where I'm just like, okay, like this is what I need to do. I'm gonna do it, but I'm not trying to like make a change in this particular area. So.
All right. I mean, I don't think all the numbers can be high, and I think everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and I don't want to call it a weakness, but
I feel like you always fight me on my goals. My goal is to be better at influencing those around me. I recognize it's a weakness and it's something I want to work on.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted you to accept all your other greatness parts and not focus on this thing that's like not even you.
No, but I think that it speaks to, and I've talked about this a little bit, like my previous job. Hopefully no one that works with me is listening. But my previous job, I was very passionate about the work. So I feel like if I were to do that at my previous job, like the influence scale would have been a lot higher because I'm passionate about this. Like I want to go above and beyond to make an impact. Whereas my current position, not so much. So I don't want my influence to be determined by the work that I'm doing. That makes sense. Like I want to be influential regardless to what I'm doing.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, but we don't have time, and I'm sorry.
So that was my reflective piece.
Okay, I disagree, but anyway, who is our lovely guest this week?
So this week we have someone that's very influential. We have Harpo on the show. Harpo is a passionate homegirl. She is a brown girl who adores being a brown girl. She's navigating and unpacking her own brown girl guilt while continuously exploring what a world without guilt looks like for herself. She loves conversations, creating space, taking space, and cultivating space. A space she really loves exploring is a third space in which hybrid bicultural identities thrive and survive. You'd probably catch her at any moment, nose deep in a book, curating a perfect playlist, or drinking red wine. Harpo is also quite the smarty pants. She graduated with a Bachelor's of Art in Sociology and Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies from Seymour Fraser University and a Master's of Art in Education and Society, Gender and Women's Studies from McGill University. So we're very excited to have her on the show this week, and we'll jump right in.
Okay.
All right, so we will hop in and get started. So I guess the first question is, how did you get started with Brown Girl Guilt? And what made you choose the name?
I got started with Brown Girl Guilt. Previous to Brown Girl Guilt, I was hosting a platform titled It's Harpo. And it was just like an Instagram account that I started just on the side. It was a separate account. And I really wanted to showcase like my experience as a brown girl living in Surrey with this like hybrid identity of like half Western, half Indian. And I had made a post on Instagram titled Brown Girl Guilt. It was just like a standalone post, and it was the most, like by far the most engaged engaged post that I had. And it did really, really well. And then I thought, okay, this is like a longer, this is a bigger thing. It's just, it goes beyond and extends beyond just this one post. And so I always thought I would maybe write a book titled Brown Girl Guilt. And essentially I like had this entire plan where I was just going to continue to do what I was doing and then just write this book and title it Brown Girl Guilt and have each chapter be like, you know, a place in my life where I experience a lot of guilt as a brown woman, as a woman of color. And one of the chapters was going to be sexuality. One of them was going to be career. One of them was going to be like romantic relationships. But I think that I ended up not wanting to write a book, and I figured I would start a podcast because it's a lot more interactive. It's a lot more fun. You get to build community with it. And the name Brown Girl Guilt was, I just felt like there was a very specific kind of guilt that I was experiencing. Well, a very specific kind of emotion that I was experiencing, which was guilt. Tied to both parts of my identity, where I was brown and then I was a girl in my home. So that's where the name came from, and then the platform ended up coming out of a craving for a sense of community that expanded beyond just you know, just posting on Instagram and then just having a blog in that way, and then also wanting to do something longer form instead of just writing a one-off book.
That's really interesting. Sure. And I have a few follow-up questions, just in terms of, I'm just curious, like what the guilt around, you said, is about just being a woman and being a brown girl. Like, where did that kind of stem from for you?
For me, it really stemmed from there were these carved out gender expectations for me as a brown girl living in a brown family. My family's background is Punjabi, so my parents were both from Punjab. They immigrated to Canada in the 90s, and so they're from a very collectivist culture, a very collectivist community where there's a communal essence between everybody. You know, all the housework is shared, all the domestic care is usually for the women in the family, and so there's very specific carved out gender roles. And I felt like I've always considered myself the black sheep of my immediate family and then my extended family, where I was always questioning things and asking why things are the way that they are, or why women have specific gender roles in the home, or why men have specific gender roles in the home. And I would bump into a lot of guilt because I still have these like very collectivist traditional values instilled in me from my parents, but then outside in the Western world, the world was like, it's your life, it's your mental health, it's your career. And so I would run into guilt because I just couldn't understand like which side of that I was supposed to choose. Was I supposed to sacrifice myself like my mom had and put the family first, but the home first? Or was I supposed to listen to all these messages outside of the home that told me that I had to take care of myself first, that self-care was important, or putting myself as first? And so I would bump into a lot of guilt when I felt like I was choosing myself over my family, or if I was choosing myself over those carved out gender roles. And it was like a really anxiety inducing experience often. Like the one experience that I share often, and this was in the original Instagram caption of the Brown Girl Guilt post, was I used to get really guilty about sleeping in past 10 a.m. on weekends because I could hear my mom like vacuuming downstairs all by herself, like an entire house by herself. And there I was enjoying luxury time sleeping in when I know she's been awake since like 6, 7 a.m. And I would run into a lot of guilt that way. And I would run into guilt in so many other things that I would do in my life. And I felt like that's not right. It doesn't feel right that I keep running into this guilt every time I try to do something for myself. And that I wanted to explore where that guilt was coming from, but then also explore how I could start to really unpack and dismantle that guilt.
Mhm.
Yeah. So how did you dismantle the guilt? Like, so do you still feel it, or how do you manage it?
I think I'm still dismantling it. I don't think it'll ever go away. I think that it's calmed down in some spaces because I've started to turn inwards and work on myself and really carve out space for myself. And in kind of understanding my limiting beliefs and understanding why I am the way that I am, I've been able to equip myself to have very specific conversations with my parents where a lot of the guilt derives from. So I can talk to my mom and dad and ask them why they have these expectations of me, where those expectations have come from for them, and how I feel in light of those expectations, and how I run into certain emotions like guilt and shame. Shame is also something that's huge that I haven't really touched on yet on the platform. But that's how I dismantle, is by asking questions and asking my parents why they have certain expectations of me, or why I have certain expectations of me too, asking where the root of that guilt comes from. It's not dismantled. I'm still dismantling it every single day. Even just like, I mean, there's like a lot happening in my family today. Um, Sitting down for an hour to record an episode for myself for something that I love to do is a guilt that I'm running into when I send a group chat message like, do not disturb me today for an hour. I'm doing something. Even that is a guilt because I know I should be with my family or I should be doing something for them. So I'm still actively dismantling it.
Yeah. I think the word should is really tricky. We have to like be careful when we use it, because you're like, I should. And I feel like that sounds like guilt right there. Like, not like I'm your therapist, but like, it's like, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. I feel like that's like, that language creates a guilty feeling, right? I don't know. It's just a quick side note. But when did you start asking questions? So when was the turning point, since you were kind of raised in that environment with specific gender roles, really? When was the turning point for you?
Honestly, I feel like I was always asking questions. I've always been a very curious kid, and I was always asking, if not out loud, I was always asking myself, or I was just like in like, my own solitude, like, why is that like that? And so I was always asking questions, and I would get into a lot of trouble for asking questions because sometimes you're not supposed to ask questions. You're supposed to just go with it, right? You've been granted this box as a woman of color. You're supposed to stick into it, and that's where you live. And so, anytime I tried to step out of the box or even ask questions that remotely resembled leaving that box, I would run into a lot of trouble. But I think I started to actively ask questions for myself and the way that things were placed for me in my life after I started to go to therapy in 2019. I went for 4 months. I went every single week. And so there's a lot of unpacking and opening up the box and taking things out and looking back to my childhood and, kind of trying to see where things were rooted in. And I think that's what really allowed me to actively start asking questions to my parents, to other family members, to my friends. That went beyond curiosity, and actually were started to like make sense of things and why they were happening the way that they were happening.
And did you feel like, because I know that sometimes in families, when there's just like an acceptance of things and then someone starts to push back a little bit, not all families are receptive. Do you feel like your family was receptive to those questions and just you wanting to kind of understand the root of like where these expectations came from?
I don't think at first they were, because they had also gone so long without
Mhm.
asking a single question and even knowing that they were allowed to ask a question. So my grandmother lives with us. She's in her 80s, and she grew up very different. She grew up in India, a very agricultural family, had 7 kids, had all these things going on. And so sometimes when I ask her questions about what it was like for her to be like a 20-year-old woman, to be a 25-year-old woman, I remember asking her a question. She was like, why do you care? Like, why do you want to know what my life was like? And I was like, that's like bizarre to me that you're confused as to why I care. I don't think they were receptive at first, because I think that they also felt like they wanted me to be into this mold. And then I remember saying to my dad once, I was like, you've raised a pretty wild kid. You've raised a pretty wild daughter, and you facilitated a lot of it because, you gave me a lot of space in the house to be myself. And so now when I'm asking you these questions, you're not allowed to get stumped. You're supposed to do the work with me. But I think that they slowly start to come to a place where those questions are allowed to be asked, and then those, and very honestly, they can say, I don't have an answer, and if they don't have an answer, I have to just accept that they don't have an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but in terms of like going to therapy and kind of working, unpacking those, but in terms of like your journey to getting where you are now, were there any specific challenges that you went through, and kind of like how did you overcome them?
I was actually asked this question in a feature a little while ago, and that was the first time that I've ever had to sit down and ponder over like what challenges I had. The best answer that I can give is I was my biggest challenge. I think I was my biggest roadblock. I have crazy imposter syndrome even until this day. And so even when I'm occupying certain rooms or I'm occupying certain spaces that I deserve to be in, I've worked really hard to be in, I'm in my way. And I think that was a really big challenge for me to get to where I am today. My life was drastically different even 2, 3 months ago, because 3 months ago I decided I'm going to get out of my way. I'm going to ask for help, and I'm going to let go of this control that I have where things need to be a certain way, they need to be a specific way. And I think that once I recognized that I was the only one holding myself back, that's when things started to really move forward and flow for me, and I could start to let go of control. I've been very honored and privileged in my life to not have crazy adversity. I've gone through my own intergenerational trauma. There's intergenerational trauma in my family. There's immigrant trauma history in my family. So I have all of those things, and there's a lot of institutional and systemic racism that exists in the city, where I live. But beyond all of that, I haven't experienced, crazy adversity, which I'm so thankful for. So I think the best way that I can say that the biggest challenge I had was like me getting my own head all the time about what I felt like I was worthy of, what I deserved, and what I wasn't deserving of.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Similar to that. So on your road to success though, were there the whole reason we started the show was because we wanted to define success for ourselves. And but on that road, and I've said this before, but a lot of people, we just focus on the end result. Even when it's presented to everyone else, it's like, we only see the finished product, but we don't see all the challenges along the way and all the failures. So on your journey, were there times where you felt like, or what you're doing, like, oh, I failed today, or I failed at this part of it? And how do you deal with that? How do you reconcile it?
Yeah, it hasn't been easy. This platform, this podcast launched officially in the beginning of January, and I think that people have this misconception that it's been super easy, but it hasn't been. Like even today, I'm so exhausted today. It's so heavy for me today. Um, and so no one will ever see that. I'll never show that to anybody, not because I believe in showing like life as a highlight reel, but because I know that this is part of the journey. This heaviness, this exhaustion. It's odd because it's like simultaneously coupled with like a lot of joy and happiness that has happened for me in the last 2 weeks. I said that on Instagram earlier today, where the last 2 weeks have been a really blended vibe for me, where I have had a lot of success. I got to be in this like massive movie production this week. I got my first big acting gig with like a huge actor. But as soon as I got home, I started crying because I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. Like I'm just so tired. I think that yes, there is this misconception that success is linear, but it's really not. There's like ups and downs all the time, and I think that sometimes I get caught up in showing the perfection of the high, of the up and down, and not the low. But I've committed myself to showing the lows, and there are, right. Like I've had I'm a very high functioning person, even though I have anxiety all the time, and my body reacts to anxiety in a really different way where. I don't know I was actually feeling anxious until days later, weeks later, and it shows up as like a fever, or it shows up as like like a really sad episode. There have been a lot of challenges. I think that my first episode is with my mom, and so my relationship with my mom has been a really rocky relationship, and we live in the same home. We see each other every single day, and so even though on the outside everything is successful, we can have an argument at home and it can really crumble me because it's something that is so strong and pivotal, and that relationship is such an anchor in my life, and it really dictates how I'm going to feel that day or not. So there are definitely struggles all the time, but social media likes to show everyone that everything is awesome, it's successful, it's wonderful, and I even contemplated like do I tell, do I tell the girls when I get here that I've had a really hard day today? Do I tell them? Do I not do this? Um, I think for me, it's so important for me to show up because I love doing these kinds of things. I love having conversations. I like showing this side of me also in all the spaces that I walk into. So I think that, yeah, to go a roundabout way, that it's not been a successful, I mean, it's a successful journey because it's like you said, it's our definition of success, but ups and downs along the entire way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's so good that you shared that, because I think that a lot of people will look at social media and be like, oh, everyone's just living this amazing, happy life and there's no struggles. But similar to what you said, like there's been times where I've had really highs and then I come home and I'm like I still feel sad, or like I still feel like something's a little bit off. And I think it's important. I think a lot of people feel that way, but don't say it.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I appreciate
And
you
I think
being
I think it's because we place our definition of, or our attainment of happiness in things external to us. I think that was a really big shift along my journey, was understanding that I'm the only one that can make myself happy. I'm the only one that can make myself feel loved. And so even though, yes, like, all those crazy things happen this week, if I'm still coming home and I'm feeling empty, or I'm feeling sad and upset, that's something that I have to address and I have to work on. Like I'm responsible for my happiness on the inside. If I'm not feeling that way, it doesn't matter what I'm showing on Instagram, because it's just going to be a farce, right?
And I think it's important to share that too, because a lot of times if we're chasing our dreams, we think and not that you use that language, but just in general, if we're chasing something, we think when we get it, then that'll fill that void, or we'll feel good. And what I'm hearing a lot is like, that's not it. You're still happy you got those things because you worked for them and it was what you wanted. But it's almost like going shopping and getting some shoes you wanted or something. You got it and it's great, but you're still you, and you're still like, I don't know. I heard Pete Holmes say, it's a comedian, and he got a show on HBO, and he had wanted this show for so long, like it was a series, and he was in New York and he was on the train going, and he said he felt depressed on the way there, like so much. And it wasn't, he wanted the show, he just was feeling out of whack. And I think some of that's like, it's a new experience, you're nervous, all that, but like it was his dream, quote unquote, but he still had like sadness along with it. Like, so not to be a Debbie Downer, but I think it's important, because sometimes when I would chase something, I would quit things because I would think, oh, it's only supposed to feel good, like the whole thing, and when you run up on those hurdles and they're so awful, it's like, well, this isn't what I was going after, so maybe I shouldn't be going after this. So that's just a rant, like I think it's really good for listeners to hear that and know that that's normal on.
It is.
Like,
and I think right after I went to therapy, I had a friend who was starting up a coaching business, and so she was like, let's just test it out. I'll get something out of it, you'll get something out of it. And I'll never forget it. I was like telling her how I'm sick and tired of chasing things, getting it, and then not feeling happy. I'm 24. I have a master's degree already. I've done so much fun stuff already. And every time I finish something, at the end of it, I haven't been happy. And she said that there's this term, and it's called a hedonistic treadmill, where you're just constantly running and you're not stopping, you're not being present to enjoy what it is that you've attained. And so for me, I've realized that I can't, there's two things that I've realized. One thing is what you said, that it's not happy all the time, that multiplicities can exist. I can have a really simultaneously great experience, but then still be like really, really feeling real shitty about it. And that's okay, because maybe tomorrow I'll feel better about it. But then also I've really started to see my life as a journey and not as a destination, because everything always felt like a destination in the past, where I felt like I need to get X, Y, and Z. And there's like these markers that I have to keep making, right? Like, okay, so I've done high school, I'll do the undergrad, then I'll go away and I'll do the master's, and then I'll come back, have a job. And then I'm going to find a boyfriend magically out of thin air. And then we're going to get married and we're going to have all these kids. And then what? Then what? Then I'll have retirement and I'll die. Even though I've known that that's not what I want in life. I don't want that. I want there to be like ups and downs and fun along the way. I've realized that if I start to see my life as a journey, then I can be present in what's happening right now and know that that's not it. I think that it also came from fear of like, okay, so I have this is it. So this is it. There's nothing else coming after this. But if I see it as a journey, I can be super excited about what's going to come next, because this experience is probably going to be far different than the other one.
Yeah, I read Tony Robbins' book a long time ago, Awaken the Giant. I think it was his first one, but he said that in that book. And I remember he said a lot of people will set goals and get them and then get depressed because they don't have anything else to look forward to. So he said his recommendation was like, keep setting goals for sure, but right after that one, you just set another one, and never stop setting them, because he said if you're wired that way, you're gonna get sad if you don't have that next thing that you're, because life is about growing and progress, and like feeling like we're doing better and better. So I just throw that out there too. I think that's such a good point. I hadn't even thought about that in so long, and that's like a really good, because I think a lot of us do that. Like, well, when I get this, boom, and then you don't have anything else. You're like, what do I do now? So yeah, I think that's a really important point.
It's also because so many of us live in either the past or the future. No one ever lives in the present until you actually start to cultivate presence. Um, there's Eckhart Tolle wrote The Power of Now, because the power is in the now. And I always lived in the future. I was always looking for the future. And ever since I started to cultivate and practice presence, I'm literally so detached to everything. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a healthy thing or an unhealthy thing. Good things happen. People are like, how do you feel? And I'm like, yeah, I'm chill. Like, on the outside, it's crazy, but I'm like, I'm chill. I'm detached. I'm living in the now. That happened 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And it's really hard to do, because I think similar to you, I'm also like always thinking about the future. But yeah, when you just let that go and you just be present, I don't know, there's a sense of relief, at least when I've done it, where it's just like I'm not worried or I'm not anxious about what's to come or what may not come, but I'm just like overthinking it. So just being present is it's a skill though. It's definitely a skill to learn how to do that.
One that takes a lot of practice, I would say.
I would venture to say it's probably from a long time. It's not a quick practice. It's gonna just keep reminding yourself, like.
And that happens to me all the time, and something will come up and I'm like, damn it, I thought I was healed. Like,
right. Yes, that's so true.
And then you make a mistake, or like a friend calls you out. A friend called me out recently about something, and I like had anxiety for days. I was like, so it's not over? I thought it was over. I thought I was done, but I got to go back and sit down and go through my problems again. Like,
and there are people I thought I forgave that are my family. I guess I didn't, because there's something will come up and I'm like, and it'll bring everything back up in my mind, and I'm like cussing them out in my head. Not to, at least I'm not doing that. But yeah, like I know you're not alone in that, and that's like one of the worst things, when you think you've like remedied something and you've taken care of it, and then it's like, hi, here I am again. Like, nobody asked you to come back.
yeah, totally.
So I guess up until this point, what has been kind of your biggest motivation to keep you going?
This is now on this side of this conversation. It's like funny, but I was 14. I was 14 and I knew I didn't want to live a mediocre life. I just didn't want one. I was like, no, I'm not going to my grave knowing that I had like a really sad life where I didn't do what I really wanted. I think that is my biggest motivation. I've been unconventional for the most part in like my curiosities, my thinking, the way that I've lived my life comparatively to people around me. And so I think that the biggest motivator for me is that I don't want to live a conventional life by my own standards, not by anyone's else. Not that I think that there's anything wrong with people who do work a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. They have those milestones, and that's they're following the checklist. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I've known that that's different for me, and I don't want to be that person. And so sometimes it can be scary, because I'm like, this is not mediocre, and I don't want a mediocre life, so I'm going to do this. And so that can be a little toxic sometimes, because you're just saying yes to everything. But I think that would be my biggest motivator. It's like, when I'm like 70, like, am I going to look back and think that was dope? I think that's my biggest motivator, really.
Yeah. I feel like I am she and she is me. That sounds verbatim like literally what I've said. I'm sure I've even said that to you, Iman, like in private conversations.
But I didn't know that at 14. To have that insight at 14 is pretty
I couldn't
impressive.
articulate it that way, but I knew it. You know what I mean? Like you were a little bit advanced as far as being able to articulate it, but I knew. I was looking around. I was like, ew, I don't want to do what they doing. Like I just, I was like, no, gross.
Gross. And there's like some things that I've like let go of where I'm like, okay, I do want that in life, or I want that in life, but still setting it on my own standards. And I think that I love that that's like a theme in this podcast, right? Is that it's your own definition, it's your own experience with it. And so I still look around and sometimes I like have like a little bit of like a tightness of chest when I see someone doing something that I don't like, but then I have to question myself. I'm like, why are you so judgy? Like, let people do what they're doing. You're not doing it anyway. But I think it's because then I bump into this idea of like, oh, I've strayed so far away from the box, and that's what the box looks like. And every time that I see someone who's living their life in this beautiful box, for them, not for me, but they're living their life in this beautiful box and I'm not, it's that much harder to be that person that's going against the grain, because I feel like I'm swimming upstream, a lot of the times I'm swimming upstream, or I'm walking a path that no one around me has walked, especially my family. So it's hard, and to constantly be, it's funny, before I jumped on this call, I'm like kind of drafting up this podcast episode that I'm doing later on this month, and it's the Bad Brown Girl Starter Pack. And I had to like pause and go away from it because I was a little bit like triggered a little because of all the things that I've heard, or I was reminded of all the times that I've doubted myself on my path, because I knew it wasn't the same path as other people, and so it was scarier to walk that path. And then all those doubts along the way, like those came up again today for me, and I was like, okay, I take a break, I come back, I know what's happening. But yeah, it's hard.
And I said the same thing. I said this before, sorry, real quick, on the podcast, like living your life on your own terms. For me, I've had moments of really serious loneliness, like because I felt like no one around me could understand me, and the people I care about and love, they care about and love me too, but they don't get me. And I remember and I told this before, I remember talking to this writer, he's like in his 50s and his life is very unconventional. And he told me like, that's part of it. You have to get used to that. Like, it's not going away. And that shifted for me. Like, I don't know. And then I just started feeling like they still love me and care about me. And that's okay that they don't understand this part of me. And I don't, and that world is kind of safe. So I kind of get them, but it was just like accepting it. Like, this, I'm not going to change my life. I'm not going to start doing what y'all like. So I got to just accept everything that comes with it. And I think that's been really, really helpful for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I wonder like if this is something that you go through as well, because sometimes I think what happens for me sometimes is I'm like, should I just give in? Like, it is lonely. It is hard. Should I just, especially when it comes to like choosing partners, like sometimes I'll complain to my friends, I'm like, oh, he works Monday to Friday. And then my friends are like, honey, most people do, right? Like most people do. And not everyone can go for brunch at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday like you do. And I'm like, okay, but like, and then sometimes I'm like, but I don't want to have to compromise who I am. But sometimes I'm like, should I not? Because it is, you're right. It's unsafe. It's lonely. And sometimes you don't necessarily meet the same people often that are walking the same kind of path as you, because it's a really bold thing to do.
Yeah. And just from my own experience, I tried to fit in once and I made a huge decision and it was real bad. So don't do it. Just keep doing what you know in your heart. Because I tried to fit in. It ended horribly. And it was a huge thing that I shouldn't have done. So, but I was getting older too. And I was like, all right, Selena, just give in, like, but it didn't work. So I'm here to tell you from experience, it won't work anyway. So you gotta just
I'm listening.
You gotta just keep on going, because everything has its pros and cons. But for me, when I tried to fit in, those cons were way worse than the cons that I had with the life that I would like. So yeah, I hope that I learned the hard way. So don't.
Yeah, and I think just going off of that, I do know quite a few people that have gone that more like traditional route, and they're not happy. But it's like, but this is safe. This is what's expected of me. So I'm just going to keep going along this, fitting in this box. But I think it comes down to like what you prioritize and like what you value. And I think part of the thing that me and Selena value over a lot of things is our own like happiness. So if it's not making us happy or making us grow in some way, it's like, that's all right.
Yeah, and I have a lot of friends who are women in their 40s, and they're double my age. But the reason we get along so well is because they're going through something right now that I'm going through now, and sometimes I'm just like, okay, if this is what happens if I go through it now, so that there's a different crisis that I deal with when I'm 40,
Mhm.
that's okay, right? Like I'll go through that now when I have. I mean, again, I don't want to say like when I have my entire life ahead of me, because I don't think your life is over when you're that age, but my priorities are different. I have a different kind of freedom and a different kind of safety net now as a 24-year-old that I probably will as a 42-year-old. So I think that, it's interesting for me to see my friends who are women in their 40s go through what they're going through then, that I have the privilege of going through now, as opposed to when I'm going to be double my age. So I think I'm just grateful for it, that even though it is hard and it's lonely, I'm really getting to set the foundation now, as opposed to, really rocking something later when there's already been so many things built up on top of it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but this is way different question. Way off the subject.
Hit me with it.
But what is something you hope people say about you when you're not in the room?
Um, that is a lovely question. I have a wall up here. It's just a bunch of frames, and one of them on the right hand side here, it says, "Consider becoming the kind of energy that no matter where you go, you add value to the space that you were in." And for me, my full name in Punjabi means one who is loved by all. And I think that's what I want to embody. Like I keep saying that I want to be a vessel through which people experience love in their lives. And so when I'm not in the room, I really want people to just feel like that was such a warm, kind energy that came in, made me feel so loved and recognized. That's my favorite. I don't want people to think I'm the prettiest or the smartest or the most eloquent or well spoken. I just want people to think that, oh, I felt really loved, by that person when they were in the room, or when they're not in the room, or when I'm not in the room. That's how I want to be remembered, and that's how I want to be spoken of like, not necessarily people pleasing, but just like she showed up, she was loved, and that's how I felt. And I think that, what I also really love is that people often say that you model vulnerability really well. It allows for me to also be vulnerable. I think that's something that I love too. Is that person made me feel really safe in their presence. So love and safety is something that I would love for people to say about me when I'm not in the room.
I'm trying to think. I think it's Maya Angelou, the quote, like, you won't remember what people say to you, but you'll remember how they feel or how they make you feel. And that's, as soon as you said that, I was like thinking about that quote. It's more so that feeling that you want to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone actually said to me this week after I left a space, they messaged me and I just met them. They're like, you're so nice. And I was like, yeah, I know I am. I know I'm nice. I have a lot of patience that looks like I'm being nice, but I'm nice. I know I am.
Own it, girl, own it.
Mhm.
um, so obviously, like, part of our podcast is really just redefining success, and bringing people on that have their own definition of success. So for you, what does success mean, and when are you kind of at your happiest or in your happy place?
I think before, success used to be, yeah, like accolades, and it used to be like, checking things off a checklist. That's since shifted and changed. I think success for me now looks like balance and alignment and joy when I'm doing things, not feeling like I want to escape when I'm in a room or doing something, or if I'm engaging with someone. I'm happiest. I was saying this to my friend the other day, that I've been receiving a lot of external success and happiness in regards to launching of the podcast and whatnot. But I said I'm genuinely the happiest when I have like a cup of coffee and I'm like on a walk by the beach or in a forest or like a home decor store. I love going to like a bookstore, home decor store, a crystal shop with a cup of coffee, headphones in my ears. That's when I'm genuinely the happiest, because I think that there's so much stillness and presence, and even if there's people around, like I still don't feel like I'm alone, but I'm alone enough that I can still be practicing solitude in that moment. But I think success for me looks like, yes, like I feel really anchored and grounded in anything that I'm doing, as opposed to thinking that this is something that I want. I think that in the past, I really placed a lot of emphasis on things external to me, but I think real success and happiness now for me looks like, how do I actually feel today? Like, what is it that's on my mind? And am I able to decipher why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling and where it's coming from? Where am I able to give to myself what it is that my body and my mind and my soul actually really needs today? And if I can't, it's been an unsuccessful day. But if I can figure out where it's coming from, or what I need to remedy it, I think that would be success. And how I feel after that would be happiness.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
I think it's so helpful when we know where things come from. Like, instead of just feeling stuff, but you like, okay, I know what happened there. I know what's going on. For me anyway, that helps me manage my emotions better when I know where it's coming from. So I love that. Not that you needed me to approve of your happiness.
It's nice that you say that, because then I'm like, okay, like I'm not the only one that's constantly like looking at my own self under like with a microscope, right?
But we spend so much time with ourselves, and I think it's so important to be able to manage yourself well, if that makes sense. We hear all this stuff all the time, like the self-help stuff and all this, but when you really practice it, it really does. In my experience, it really does help. But anyway, so this is also a different question. Well, it's kind of it's similar. Your inner circle, they say your inner circle is really important. What qualities do people have to be in your inner circle?
I think that they definitely have to be, they have to have that like that loving, kind quality, right? That's something that's very important to me. I don't necessarily like people who are not rooted in love. Like if they can't necessarily see the good in the situation, I think that that's something, like they have to really be anchored in gratitude. Those are the people that are in my circle, people who are just grateful for everything and anything under the sun. Happy, like really hippy dippy people. I think they just have to be good people. Like they have to have a good heart. I think that's what I've been really mindful of moving forward. Is before in the past I used to judge people a lot for like a lot of external things. And I read this post early this morning, and it was like, when I understood that almost every adult that I meet is like a traumatized adult, I started to like see people differently and see them for who they truly are, as opposed to like what they've been conditioned to be. And I think that if someone has a really good pure heart and they have good intentions, and they have a lot of care for me in their world, they have a lot of care for other people in their world, then they can be my inner circle. Because I think that everything else is just things that we're unlearning and unworking on our journey back home to ourselves. And that can all be, unless you're like, like an incredibly horrible human being, you're just like toxic all the time. I think for the most part, people are just like figuring themselves out, and I think we can grant everybody grace on those journeys. And I really enjoy like creative, fun people who believe in things bigger than themselves. Like I love people who like to ponder and are curious, and can have conversations like these kinds of conversations and other conversations. I really like people who are really who are tuned in enough to know that there's more happening beyond just like this.
Yeah. You sound like me. Sorry, I didn't know you were going to talk. I swear, every time when you talk, I'm like, I've said that to myself.
Well, there's no surprise that we probably aligned at this point.
Right.
The reason we reached out to you.
Yes. Because she's like, that's me right there.
It's nice to hear. It's nice to hear like somebody else feels exactly how you feel, like about a lot of things, not everything. But,
yeah, it's really affirming for sure.
Yeah.
I guess what has been your biggest, or for our listeners that are interested in, maybe stepping outside of the box, starting a podcast, kind of doing their own version of success, what piece of advice would you give them?
I would give two. So I would say to just go for it. I think that I held myself back for so long because I kept telling myself the timing wasn't right, or it was too scary, or honestly, most importantly, that it had to be perfect. I would always say like it has to be perfect before it goes out. I think that you should just go for it and allow for room to make mistakes, because those mistakes are actually not mistakes, they're detours, and they kind of like lead you to a certain path, and it opens up a lot more for you. You only know by doing, and you only find out by trying. That's one thing that I would say. And then the other thing is to just really trust yourself and trust your intuition. I think that um, only you know how to be you the best, and only you know how to do what it is that you want to do the best. And yes, we can. I mean, I have a team. I think that was something that I had to really like teach myself, that it's okay for me to not have to do everything on my own, because of all that's happened to me before in the past, where I needed to have control. I needed to be the boss and leader all the time. I have a team and I have people that I really trust, but I also, at the end of the day, trust myself first and foremost. I'm only able to place trust in other people because I trust my judgment of those people. And so I would really say to trust yourself. If something doesn't feel right, or something doesn't feel aligned, or you have a different vision for something, but someone else on your team has a different vision for it, really tune into yourself and see what you truly want, because it's you putting in the work every single day. It's you showing up every single day. And if it's not aligned with who you are as a person, it won't go far. Because I think when you start to really walk in a frequency and live in the frequency that you're meant to live in your truest authentic expression, everything always works out. It always works out. You don't even have to try. You don't even have to make an effort. When you're just being yourself, everything just works out for you. So I would say that those two things for sure.
Mm.
So you're only 24. How'd you get so wise?
I started to be an adult when I was like 5, due to just like issues around me. I think, I don't know. I always just, sometimes I just like, I had this one time where I was like hanging out with people from my past, and there's still people in my life now, but they just have a different place in my life. And I was just sitting there, and I don't know what happened, but when I got home, I like started to bawl my eyes out, and I was like, "Oh, universe, thank you so much for choosing me, because people suck and I'm not like them anymore." But I don't know. I think there's a bigger order in the world, there's a bigger purpose for me, and that's why I was like chosen to heal this quickly, and to gain this much wisdom at 24. I meditate a lot, and I also read a lot of books, and that's why I am the way that I am at 24.
Do you have any favorite books or books that you would recommend?
I love books by Black women. I love them. I always say that Black women have been so instrumental in my healing journey. All About Love by Bell Hooks. I love Iyanla Van Zandt. She's got In the Meantime, but any of her books are so great. And I really liked Oprah's Wisdom of Sundays, I think it's called. I really liked those books. But there's one book that I read recently. It's called Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and it's like gets all the rave, in the world. But I think rightfully so, because it really brought me to tears when I first read it. And I think there's a book that I just read recently. It's If You're on the Existential Side of Things, but it's called The Feminine Awakening of the Sacred in Women, or something like that it's called. And it really gave me a lot of clarity for this path of spirituality for women, and what it means to us, and what it means to start to cultivate this like sacred garden for yourself in your life. So tons of books. I don't nearly share them enough anymore on Instagram, but I used to a lot. But I should start a book club. It'd be fun.
Yeah. We were talking about that too. I think books saved my life. Like, and what's funny? My mom had In the Meantime by I can't say her name.
I can't say her name.
By Miss Van Zandt. And she had that bookshelf she had that book on the bookshelf for years. I never paid it any attention. And when I was like 19, I just walked by it and something said, pick this book up. Like, and I was like, it really reminded me of the quote, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Because when I read that book, it changed my whole perception. I didn't change that day, but I never was the same after that book. And it opened me up to like that genre or whatever you want to call it, like that world. And I started reading a bunch of books like that. But I think that book is so great. Yeah, and I'm not even exaggerating. Like it changed my life. Like it was the like catalyst to getting things going in that direction. And I wasn't the same after it. So
we really are the same person, because that's the exact same experience that I had with that book. Like that book, something clicked for me, it shifted for me. I didn't get into any romantic relationships after I read that book for a long time, because I was like, I get it. But it was the catalyst for me, and understanding like myself and understanding like the levels of like self-awareness. She uses the metaphor of a house, and so there's like some people who live in the basement, and there's some on the first floor, second floor, third floor, and then if you're lucky you get to the attic. I think that was instrumental in changing my life, and I think that it really opened me up again to it, like a plethora of even more wonderful, beautiful Black women healers that just found their way into me. Maybe I was emitting that kind of frequency and energy onto the universe while I was reading that book, that those books started to come into my life. But I agree with you, books really saved my life, and I love underlining and like highlighting and writing in the margins. I love it all.
Yeah, in the same way. That's so nice to hear. Like, yeah, like you said, it's affirming, and it's so, yeah, I love that. I love it. We came to almost our hour really fast. Did it feel fast to y'all?
It did. It went by really quick for me.
This by, I was like, don't want it to end.
Right. I'm like, I don't know what else to say. Do you have anything else in mind?
No, we'll do our.
I wonder if, like, I would love to talk to you both and ask you like what your intention behind this podcast has been, and what has it been like for the two of you to create this space?
Mm-hmm. So me and Selena have been friends for what, 5 years now?
Yeah,
4 or 5 years.
But yeah, somewhere around.
Yeah, the numbers will for a while. But I think one of the things that we really aligned with was just having, like, not necessarily following what society says we should do. So really living lives that are kind of outside of the norm, and trying to find what makes us happy that might not, make sense to other people. Mm-hmm. So when we were talking about, we had talked for a while about starting something and doing something. And when we were talking about things that we enjoyed, it was all around like self-help, living life on our own terms, freedom. We both love to travel. So like all of those things combined, we're like, well, let's just do a podcast. We can do it from anywhere. And well, despite COVID, but we can do it from anywhere in the world. It gives us the freedom to bring people on that are kind of doing a similar thing, like living life on their own terms and making an impact. At least that's kind of where I was at. Yeah. Anything you wanted to add, Selena?
Yeah, I mean, so Iman and we said this before, but like we both didn't want to work for people. I mean, mm-hmm. that's where it really, that was the how it really started. And then we were like, we didn't know what to do. And then we were going to do like a book club, like that's still in the works, and like a blog. And then we just decided on the podcast, but also because we get to meet, like Iman said, like meet people who are similar to us. And like you were saying earlier, Harpo, like I don't meet these kind of people in my everyday life all the time. You know what I mean? So it's nice that it's a place we can like, come talk to us, come help everyone see this vision a little bit. And then if I'm being honest, it was also like, I wanted to be somebody. In the beginning of it, that was some of what it stemmed from. Like, I didn't want to be regular. I wanted to do something cool and something I was proud of. And that's just me being really, really transparent. Like, I just wanted something to be proud of. And I am proud of the podcast. Like, and I'm proud of that we stuck with it, but it's a lot more challenging than I thought it would be. I didn't know all the behind work. And that makes me even more proud that we stick with it even though it's way different than we thought it would be. And I always say, like, I wouldn't be able to do this without Iman. I would have quit. Like, and I'm for real. I'd have been like, this is too much. I didn't sign up for all this. So it like, and there's days I don't feel like recording. Like if it was just me talking, it would not be every week. Like here's the podcast once a month or something. Like if I don't have someone holding me accountable. So I don't know if I hope that answers the question, but it's mainly like, I wanted to be somebody, I wanted to go somewhere, and I wanted, into something that we're proud of, and we learn from, and we grow so much from it. And I hope it keeps growing and we expand. But does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I got all of that even while we were recording without even knowing all of that explicitly. But I feel you, man. I've started podcasts too, just for the same reason. So I feel you.
It's funny because I wanted to start one like 7 years ago, and I told him this too, but I didn't know anybody, and I was like, I'm going to interview people. I wanted to be like Oprah, and but not like not the deep stuff, but like
We are the same person.
Right. I didn't want to talk about the stuff like the heavy stuff, like, but I wanted to do her part where she's talking to Miss Van Zandt and bringing these people on. And because Oprah, like, I feel like she changed the world. I know it's like, but she was the first one mainstream to talk about spirituality. I went back and was watching like her old shows on YouTube. So I don't know. I've always had this like, and I'm sure a lot of people feel it, but like this affinity for her, this feeling of like, this, I don't know, like kinship or something. And I wanted to be like Oprah. I still do in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think it's because she was able to take like something as, I mean, it's not simple, but before Oprah did it, having a conversation was something simple, and creating dialogue and holding space for someone was something that we just did. And then she made an entire like full-fledged career out of it. And I think like that was so framing because I'm such a good talker and I'm such a good listener. I'm a good question asker. I'm a good host. And it's like, she can do it. It's there. She created an entire arena for it. And so now we can step in and then like still talk about all that we love, right? Like these kinds of conversations where three of us, where I've never met you both before, had to ask you where all of us were located even before we got here, but then still be able to talk about these kinds of things that I don't even talk about some of the closest friends in my life with.
Yeah. It's so true. And one of the reasons, I know this is a little off, but I think this is helpful. One of the reasons that I like Oprah so much is because I feel like she always, and I know like we only hear bits and pieces, but from what I hear from her story is she honored herself. And what you were saying earlier, like listening to your intuition and even when she was a news anchor and she was like, this is not for me. And she got out of it. Me, I would have stuck and been a news anchor for 10 years. And then like, guys, this ain't been, and I wait until I feel miserable. I start resenting the job. I start being nasty. And it's like, that's your fault. You could have just been left. Like, so that's what I love so much about her is that I feel like she always listens to those whispers. She takes time to feel them, but she, even way back in like I guess there was like the 80s or whatever, she honored herself. And I think that's why I revere her so much. And I think that's why she's had so much success. I don't think she lets the world tell her who she's going to be. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. Not everybody, but we try to fit into these molds. And she was like, no.
That's not for me.
No. Yeah. I think part of her was like, I can't fit into the molds of a TV host at this time. No one looked like her. So I gotta create my own lane, and she created it. Okay. So
she sure did.
I think that's why I know she's human at the end of the day, and she makes mistakes like anyone else. But as far as her path and her career and stuff, I really hold her on a pedestal, which I think she rightfully belongs there in my mind. So that's my girl.
All right. Well, we're towards the end. Did you have anything else, Selena?
No, I do want to say, and I usually don't say this, I really loved meeting you, Harpo. I love talking to you, and you made me feel so happy today. If I'm being honest, I did not feel like recording today. This is one of them days where I was like, just hurry up, get this hour over. I'm ready to go. I'm just being real, like, and that's realistic. Like, we're not going to sit here and say every week I'm thrilled, because But as soon as I started talking to you, I was like, oh, I'm so happy. And it was a reminder of why we're doing it and stuff.
Mhm.
So y'all have weeks like that, don't I? Like that you're like,
There's
Oh,
been,
100%. I like totally forgot that like it was gonna be like a visual. Like I didn't do my makeup. Like I didn't do anything. And I got here. I was like, oh, like because I've just been so spaced out. There's just been so much going on. But you're right. I didn't want to. I was. It's not that I didn't want to record. I was just like, okay, I'm really gonna have to fake like being this like person. But I didn't have to fake being anyone.
Me
I could just.
too.
I just ended up shifting. Like I just had like an energetic reboot talking to you, both of you.
Me too. What were you gonna say, Iman? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I was listening to this podcast. It's been my mantra like all week, but they were saying like just because I sometimes I'm like I don't want to do something and then just don't do it. But it was just saying like just because I don't want to do something doesn't mean I shouldn't. So I've been like saying that consistently in my head, and for me it's been like a little push because I'm like okay,
Yeah.
but yeah. I've definitely had those weeks where I'm like, I don't want to, because it's early here. Like we start at 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Out on the weekends. So getting up early sometimes is a little tough, but it's just, as soon as we hop on and talk. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that that's it. This is it, right? Like we showed up even. I think the key is that we showed up and then we made it what it ended up being. We all did that together. And I agree. I'm so happy that I got to meet the both of you and that we're going to be in each other's orbits now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I have to remember that quote, Iman. That's a good one. Cause child.
All week I've been saying it in my head. I'm like, all right, Iman. Go.
As soon as we got on, I was like, Iman has to carry this interview. I ain't gonna better do it today.
And then you did it.
And then it should. So I love that so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So we'll do our little outro, and then
okay.
Yeah.
So thank you again, Harpo, for sharing your time with us and inspiring our listeners to redefine success for themselves. Remember, you can find Harpo's podcast, Brown Girl Guilt, on, where is it available?
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google.
So all the main ones, y'all. And then follow Harpo on
Instagram, browngirlguilt_.
And we'll put those links in the show notes as well.
And of course, thank you, listeners. We could not do this without you. Again, remember to hit like, comment, and share this episode. And please leave a review. We always love to hear your feedback. Remember to subscribe at You Plus Happy Podcast on YouTube. And you can also follow us on Instagram at You Plus Happy.
We'll see you next week, same time, same place. And we ask our guests to say our tagline. Are you ready? It's long, okay?
It's a little long.
We'll show you our definition of success if you show us yours.
We'll show you our definition of success if you show us yours.
Oh, nailed it!
You got it on the first try.
Yes.
Not everyone does.
No.
I'm one of a kind.
Thank you so much. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.